welcome to What the Lux, a Matter of Form podcast. You're probably looking at me and seeing a little bit of a different face today. So I'm James, I'm the strategy director at Matter of Form. And today I have the fantastic Tobias Kormind in front of me to talk about his journey with 77 Diamonds. And, you know, I can say it's going to be a really interesting chat. And we're actually going to talk a lot about innovation, because I don't mind saying, with Tobias here, one of the things that's really interesting and inspiring about the journey that you guys have gone on is you were one of the first people to really start in that digital space, like the start of the internet, kind of thinking about how things could be done slightly differently, and providing a lot more kind of transparency and choice and putting the customer first in an industry that used to be very, very opaque. So I'm really interested and excited to kind of get into the chat today. So for those of you who don't know Tobias is the founder and CEO. Am I correct in saying this?
Managing director, I think, is the
technical
more
term.
Anglo version
of 77 Diamonds.
Yep.
A brand that's been around for 20 years now?
Yep.
Something like that?
Absolutely.
2 decades. And I think what's really special about 77 Diamonds, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, but was I think you were ahead of the game on a lot of things, particularly when it came to transparency, perhaps how you were thinking about breaking down some of those traditions and an industry that's quite opaque, if I might use that word.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to kind of today just dig into a little bit of that and hear a bit about the genesis really of 77 Diamonds and your background, Tobias, and where it all came from.
Yeah, well, my background has very little, it has a lot and very little at the same time to do. I came into an industry that I really knew very little about. But the origins of 77 Diamonds was basically, I have a brother-in-law who's, was running his family diamond business. They had offices all around the world. And I spent a little bit of my vacations kind of, in his office. And he would chuck some diamonds at me and go, tell me what this is, tell me what that is. But it was more just a game, and it was fun, and it was just interesting. I've always been very interested in business since I was a kid. And so I loved going to, anybody who had a business to talk to them about what they do, how they do it, and so on. But it was really around the time when I studied law, I went into banking, and then I got really excited by technology and internet. And when the kind of internet boom was...
The baby internet, so to speak, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's actually quite incredible. But when that was really emerging as a force, I decided that was so much more exciting than where I was, and that's where I wanted to be. And so I joined up with some partners, and through a circuitous route, basically. And we set up an online marketing agency, actually, where we worked for a range of luxury brands. And we were helping to bring them online, basically. And I got really excited by that. And we wanted to do some proprietary businesses as well. And at that time, I had one of my close friends needed a diamond. He knew my connections to my brother-in-law, and he asked me to source a stone for him, which I did. And then I had to run down to Hatton Garden, had a ring made for him. And then I started getting phone calls from some friends of his, and his fiance, then later wife, and so on. So it seemed like there was a market for it. I wasn't looking for it; it just kind of happened that way. And then I turned around to my business partners at the time in the agency, and I said, "Let's use all the technology that we're building and the luxury marketing experience that we have." I think there's room in the market for some kind of diamond jewelry company, and that's kind of how it started. And so we kind of ran it as a hobby. And then a few years later, I thought, this really needs proper focus and attention. I had brought in my now business partner, who is 3rd generation diamonds, and spent his childhood
around
in Antwerp, in big and small. Yeah. In South Africa, he went to buy diamonds with his father at digs, and then he himself polished diamonds. So, somebody with real experience in the industry. And I was coming at it from kind of a finance, e-commerce, marketing kind of background. And so, we were coming at it completely differently, but he loved the idea of joining up and getting involved. And really, then we took it out from the agency and we started to really push it basically. And I do look back at the periods of time, and we spent like the first year we were so excited, and we spent all this time like thinking about our education section, how it had to be market leading. You spend a lot of time on things that are not that important. I mean, it's not that it isn't important, but there were a lot of other things that were important. But we were lucky because we were attached to kind of a design agency, and they helped us with this. That was my first real experience of brand and luxury brand, and they work on some really interesting stuff, and they started drawing the graph and figures. So, by the way, I don't think I've ever talked about this before. I'm like, this is reminding me of the origins though. But the way that they thought about from a design perspective, what the website should look like, and the journey of the user was just, I mean, it like opened up this whole universe that I didn't really realize. When they were talking about this kind of emotive feeling, subliminal experience that the customer would have, and the navigation and the clean lines. And that, I think that really set us off on a good trend to try and not just make something low cost, but actually make something that has appeal to people, that resonates with consumers. And then, that was the beginnings of really understanding that this business has to be built around consumers and their experience, and not really kind of what we think needs to be done.
Because it's such a, or it has been traditionally, such a kind of closed black box industry, quite hard to understand, particularly, there's lots of comments on kind of, scarcity driving price, and like not a lot of transparency around things. And so to have that kind of revelation, or that moment where you're like, we're going to kind of turn that on its head perhaps, and think about things in quite a different way in terms of opening things up, thinking about the customer first, what their needs are, versus just falling into the familiar tropes of how it's always been done. Were you aware of like how much you were kind of pushing against things when you started 77 Diamonds?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, you've touched on a lot of interesting things here. So actually, before I answer that direct question, I think a lot of the opaqueness, and we should address that because it's a subject that I think people don't talk so much about anymore. But actually, if you look at the origins of diamonds, so, they were first discovered in India. And they ended up on the Mughals, right? They made it into the kind of royal jewelry. The Gioconda mines, where the Kohinoor comes from, I think the facts are something like less than 1 million carats were ever taken out of those mines, which may sound like a lot, but it's actually not very much. So there was true scarcity, because when people discovered diamonds and started cutting diamonds and they were distributed out, I mean, it was incredibly hard to get a hold of diamonds. The quality was quite low of the ones that ended up in the kind of the West and with royals and so on. I mean, it was a mixed bag, but it was pretty rare to get good quality diamonds. Making its way to kind of, everyday people was almost impossible, unaffordable, and there was just so few of them around. So there was true scarcity, which is, I think, part of where the myth about diamonds actually comes from, and because only the wealthiest of people could use them in their jewelry. And then actually what happened was in South Africa, in the Orange River, a kind of stone was discovered, and, it makes sense that it ends up in the river because all the kind of the rock around the diamond has to be rubbed away for it to be kind of, to be revealed basically. And then that was the beginning of the boom of the diamonds and the origins of De Beers, which, at one point was literally just a monopoly in the whole diamond world. But then there was discovery, and they dug, and lots of diamonds were discovered, and then there was a diamond crash, price crash. And then Cecil Rhodes started consolidating, all the diamond mines, and realized that actually below the soft surface, if you dig through the harder surface, there's a lot more diamonds below. Okay. And I hadn't realized that, and he, bought lots of diamonds out, and then controlled the supply of diamonds into the industry. So the scarcity was in effect created, and it's true. There is a kind of form of scarcity, but if you compare it to, less than 1 million that was ever taken out of the Gioconda mines. And then today where you have something like...
So that myth kind of lives on perhaps a little bit, or like that kind of sense of scarcity has been built from so many years ago.
When there was true scarcity. And look, when you go up in quality of diamonds and you start, you're talking about larger diamonds, although technologies now allows you to dig out larger diamonds more consistently than before. But larger diamonds are very rare, and especially the high quality ones. So the more, the larger the size, the higher the quality, the more scarce it is. And that is true. And then you've got this amazing pocket of diamonds, which is the true rare, like pinks and blues and oranges and reds. Something like just over 100 red diamonds have ever been certified by the GIA. Gives you a sense of how rare those actually are.
Wow.
And pink diamonds, the Argyle mine is in Australia is very famous. That's where the highest quality pink diamonds come from. But you get pink diamonds occasionally from some of the other mines as well. But so those are true rare, extraordinary colors when they're in their kind of pure form. And they are the peak of the diamond market basically, and I think they really set the precedent for the desirability of diamonds. And then I look at the kind of the colorless white diamonds as more accessible part of the industry, because there's very few of us that can own the Mona Lisas of this world, and
Sure.
pink, blue diamonds, they're kind of in the same kind of caliber class.
Makes sense. And just kind of returning to perhaps, the formation of 77 Diamonds and some of those category conventions that you were pushing against, or perhaps different, deciding to do the business in a fundamentally kind of quite different way to what would be the majority of jewelers back then. What were the things that you came up against, and was there like a underlying philosophy on how you wanted to run this business that, did put you kind of head to head with things, but you knew that was the right kind of way to go?
So look, the challenge was we saw that this was a huge market. It's not like ordinary luxury. There is a sentiment in society today, which we've seen grow, where it's almost a needs business. So the engagement ring process has so much emotion around it. And there's an expectation today about, when you get engaged, that you'll be given an engagement ring. And, I come from Scandinavia, and traditionally there was no such thing really as a diamond engagement ring. That was an American concept. And actually what's happened is that the internet has kind of, dominates, and social media spread everywhere. What's happened is countries like China, that also didn't have a tradition of it, now is the second largest consumer of diamonds in the world. And so it's not just America anymore. It's Scandinavia, which is, quite a socialist, kind of, people sometimes don't even get married. And so what's happened is, I think that the new generation coming through have adopted this kind of global fascination about the engagement ring process, the relationships, the expectations. And so it's become this global phenomenon, and demand has massively increased for that concept. And I think that that's a lot of people's kind of introduction into the world of jewelry is through something like, their first purchase is likely to be the engagement ring, although, some people's journey starts earlier than that. But what fascinated me about the kind of origins and the concept was, here's a very old industry. It's very opaque, and in need of modernization. And there's a lot of beautiful aspects to it. I've totally fallen in love with it. And it's wonderful that things are still kind of completely hand finished, handmade, and the craftsmanship on it is just incredible. But the experience for the consumer was very much like mass production. It used to be in the UK, it's overseas now. And you walk into a store and you get, so attention, you get a limited amount of choice, and that's it basically. That was kind of the purchase experience. And you've got technology, you've got, we've brought access to the global diamond market for the consumer, where they can shape and form their own purchase in a kind of bespoke way. So it's a made to order process, which completely turned turned on its head the traditional way that people were consuming and purchasing jewelry. So we saw that there was a massive opportunity to bring much better value to the consumers, to let them engage with the process and actually shape their own purchase. And then it's so much more special if you're giving something that you've made decisions on, that it's made to order specifically for you, and you've been able to look at every aspect in detail and do lots of research. It becomes a much more meaningful gift than if it's just something you walk into a store, purchase, and then, because what it represents, if you think about it, it's human relationship. What a lot of the jewelry represents is a connection between two people,
two unique individuals.
Yeah, where you're expressing, it can be a thank you to a parent, it can be to a friend, it can be to a lover, but what you're doing is you're crystallizing the emotion that you have into some kind of purchase, and then it's something they're going to wear kind of forever as well. So I think it's an extraordinary part of the consumer cycle in a way. We're very privileged to be part of that and to kind of, help enable in some small way, but create a more meaningful gift that, a connection between the people that can be crystallized. And I really like
tearing up a little bit.
No, I'm not. No, but listen, this is,
I think it's beautiful what you've described. I would love to hear like a little bit more about how you take people on that emotional journey and kind of, because there's also a degree of education that has to happen with clients when they go on that journey. We don't all know what the 4 C's means, and all of these other aspects. And then there's this emotional kind of roller coaster that someone is, not roller coaster, but like they're trying to encode something about their relationship, which is very special with an individual into, as you said, something of lasting permanence. So like, how do you take them on that journey? What are the kind of the moments in it that you think are particularly special? And yeah.
So I mean, I've touched upon a little bit of that, but what we wanted to do was build a business around the consumer, so that, because I think it's precarious, I think it's a little bit stressful, and actually, if you give them all the tools that a consumer needs, without the pressure which you can have in a store experience and so on. So online has really opened up that world, so you can look at exquisite detail, the jewelry from all angles. You can spend time, really engage with it. The same with the diamond and all the specs, and do all the research. What you're doing is you're taking out a lot of the sales pressure. You're giving the consumer a lot of choice. You're giving them the education, access to, in an omni-channel kind of fashion, to experts who can help guide them through. And so we don't have an agenda to sell them something that we have in store. We want, we're giving them access to the global market, and they can create anything they want with us. We have really talented bespoke designers. We've got a great head of design that's created some fabulous jewelry as well. So really, in that kind of environment, what we've done is we've turned the model of traditional jewelry on its head and empowered the consumer, both in value, what they can get for their budget, but also in terms of like a limitless amount of, creativity. And we'll tell them if what they're designing doesn't work. So, with the practical kind of parameters. But it was really amazing to go in and actually create something with that kind of concept in mind. And it's, so that was the big idea, but then we've evolved it, and we've evolved it by listening to our staff, who are amazing and really passionate, and they feedback. There's a feedback loop all the time about what the experiences are, how we can improve things, and then we listen to the consumer, and the consumer tells us, if you listen properly, you can really pick up and help reshape the business. And I think we're in this, I don't like to be boxed in or get stuck in the ways that we do things. I'm almost allergic to it. And everyone knows in the business that if I ask somebody, why are we doing it like this? And they say to me, because that's how we always do it. That's how to really, I'm pretty calm, but that really, agitates me, and people know that. And so I think, and they're open, it's about keeping everyone quite open to listening and getting the feedback. And that's how the business has evolved. I think that's why we've been really successful, and, and merging this kind of digital environment. You were like a digital native and created something from scratch, but at the same time going into a very traditional industry has been just fascinating to try and merge those two worlds and figure out what really kind of works and to get the best out of both of them. And so I think the brand today, the company today is really a representation of that, of the old and the new merged and working really well together.
How do you encourage that kind of culture of innovation, that ability for people to not just take things as they are or as accepted ways of doing things and actually kind of pursue, is there a better way of doing this? Is there a better idea? Like, how do you encourage that culture internally?
Yeah, it's just, I think the business leaders in general, it's hiring the right kind of people, I think, that resonate with that concept, not hiring closed-minded people. And we've seen that sometimes people, it just doesn't work, because they get stuck in their ways. And I think a lot of it comes from the leadership. If we are open to change, we're adopting to new technology, we're embracing AI, and any kind of technology we think that can add value to the experience for the consumers. And so we've been experimenting with a whole bunch of different things as we've been going along. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. And as long as you're willing to kind of take a little bit of a chance and experiment in a controlled fashion, and then keep doing that. And in the end, there is no big revelation. Usually it's incremental benefits that you find by continuing to innovate, basically.
Do you have like an R&D budget or anything like that? Like, do you apportion stuff to?
Yeah, no, we do.
Really?
Do. Yeah, we allocate. I mean, so what we do is if we find stuff, we try and find the budget for it to see if we can experiment. And so we've tried like a range of stuff, but we're not a science company, a biotech company that has where 80% of gets poured back into R&D. It's not quite like that, but we spend quite a bit of time and effort on new designs, and then we're always looking for better technology, and we follow a lot of different technologies. I think there's a lot of augmented reality. A lot of it's not really been there. We were waiting for the rendering.
For like try-ons and stuff like that and things,
it's the experience there is still pretty poor.
Yeah.
And so we've held back kind of investing in that, but we will go when we think it gets there. And it was the same thing with photorealistic rendering. We were experimenting it for years, and then finally it became good enough that we thought we could use it. And it's just kind of, it's snowballing at the moment, in the ability to do that. And even with some of our campaigns, bringing in kind of AI movements and so on, it's just incredible what you're starting to be able to do now. So yeah, it's really exciting.
As a business that puts so much stock in kind of human craftsmanship and empowering other people's creativity as well with designing pieces and things, what is your kind of position on sort of AI as a business? What do you use it for? What don't you use it for? Have you, or are we still in kind of play mode at the moment? What's the vibe?
No, we're way past the play mode. I mean, we're readily embracing and adopting it. But so there's two parts of that. I think there's the one part which is the kind of slightly more pessimistic doom and gloom version, which is we're all going to be out of a job. It's kind of.
Keep listening. We're going to get to the positive bit.
It's the bad bit first.
Yeah.
But look, I think it does represent a threat to humanity, and if you listen to some of the kind of doom mongers, most jobs are going to kind of be replaced and so on. So I think definitely it's one of the industries where if you look at the craftsman, I think it's going to be extremely hard for AI to kind of replace that anytime soon. But I can see we're using AI, but the way I see it is that AI will empower people to do more things, to do things better, to be more responsive, to not miss stuff, to be able to respond, to more customers and so on. So it's empowering our customer service team and our sales team. So I think there's a lot of positives to be gained there. There's a lot of admin things that we're using it for, to process invoices and to match things up, much quicker than a human can do, to make sure that we've, ticked all the boxes and so on. So those kind of things are really interesting. And I think even on the design front, I think we'll be able to get more creative quicker. And again, I don't see it as replacing people. I think it's about letting people be able to deal with more things and become more efficient. So I think there's a lot, like I said, admin savings that we can peel out. But I think it'll be a very sad day when you start really replacing people with AI. But there's lots of industries where the value add, the creativity levels are lower, where it's much easier to let AI, do those kind of things. And my worry is like, how far is the creep?
Yeah,
How far will it go? And are we talking about a completely different life experience in 10 years time where AI is moved way past savant level to super savant level, and where so, and I'm always also worried about lots of nefarious actors being able to command that kind of power and technology for not the betterment of humanity.
Well, one thing that is sort of interesting to me, and I guess it's because of the origins of the business as being a little bit different in terms of having that digital first customer centricity, but it's like the business's kind of adaptability. You've got lab grown diamonds that are available and that you're using, and so that's like a big shift in terms of things. And I think one of the other things, the other shifts that's really interesting that I'd love to get your take on and understand how you've kind of facilitated this is that as kind of, I guess, not gender roles have changed, but like there's been perhaps an easing of tradition around certain things. And, now people going perhaps more on a co-creation journey together for that engagement ring. It's not just a kind of a blind surprise. For some it is, and for many it is, but there's also this perhaps desire where, it's something special, you want to do it together. How have you guys kind of adapted to those sort of perhaps more societal kind of cultural changes?
Yeah, so I mean, look, lab growns is definitely like an adaptation in the sense. So we ummed and ahed about whether we should create a separate brand. Is it going to dilute the existing brand? But in the end, it's really about giving choice to the consumer. And what's fascinating about lab grown is that actually for many young couples, lab grown represents an ability to get something which is a bit more substantial in size. With a more limited budget, and what I think is great about it is they don't walk away feeling like inadequate in some way, shape, or form. That they've only been able to buy this little tiny natural diamond, but actually they can get something of substance that they feel good wearing. And to be honest with you, they can upgrade. If their fortunes change in their future, they don't have to, but I mean they could. And we have people coming back and upgrading.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
that's interesting, isn't it? Because you'd think it was aligned to a kind of a moment in time or
that's some people. It depends. Like what's important for people. I mean, some people come in and have replicas of their natural diamond made in lab grown, and that's their travel, jewelry, basically. But in the beginning, we hesitated, and then we decided, what, if it's considered precious, we can put it inside, beautiful crafted jewelry, and why not? So I think we're quite open to kind of what we put in our jewelry in a sense. No, we wouldn't put everything. It has to be kind of some aspirational type gemstone or whatever. But like we don't offer all the different types of gemstones. But if a customer came in and wanted some semi-precious stones put in, and we do that kind of on a regular basis, we're more than happy to do it. And what they'll get is a great made piece that will last. So I think we're a bit open. Again, it's a little bit about the accessibility of fine jewelry. Why we're happy to open that up to a larger pool, and I think that's what lab growns does as well. So in a way, it kind of brings people earlier on their journey and association with fine jewelry and diamonds, and opens it up to pieces like that, and then they can go along the journey, and some will never go back and buy another piece. That'll be it, and some will make it a regular purchase basically, and it just completely depends on the type of people and how big a collection of jewelry they want to have. and so on. And we have got great customers that come back, on a really regular basis. A lot of them, will make just complete bespoke pieces, something unique, and so on. So I think it's, lots of different customers, lots of different types of things that you can make with your jewelry. I love the heirloom stuff where you come in with your grandma's brooch. We take some stones out and recreate, a modern piece of jewelry instead of that sitting in some box somewhere. You're wearing something that someone you were connected to, loved, and it becomes your everyday, which is, I think, really wonderful.
One thing we've touched on in several ways, but I would love to kind of get your opinion on it, is that when you come up with a new way of doing things, we talked about earlier, you hate that expression, like we do it this way because we've always done it that way. When there's like new solutions proposed, what's your kind of process for figuring out whether that's the right way to do things, or like testing that idea or implementing it? Do you have like a philosophy for how that sort of stuff is done at 77 Diamonds?
It's not very scientific, but it's like 80-20 rule. Like we try and get concepts up and running really quickly, and then we see if it's got legs. And if it does, then we'll do some iterations of it to make it better. That's our philosophy. We've done that with just so many different things. And then every once in a while, you got to hold your breath and you do something new and you're not sure if it's going to work. So, I think lab growns was definitely one of those. We were like, hope this is going to work and it's not going to have an impact and so on. But it was like from the get go, it was positive and people, took to it really well. So yeah, I'll give you an example of something that didn't work.
That would be really exciting. Yeah.
Not sure I can't promise you exciting, but we were probably like 10 years too early on the video side of things. So
okay.
So online video, like
slow
appointments.
Okay.
So it was basically, so we bought some quite expensive kit and we launched it, and it was just like, customers didn't want to be on camera. They were like, no, I don't want to, they were like, and they'd switch their camera off. I think it's pretty different today. And now we obviously have it all the time, but and it was, the quality wasn't great. It was just lagging a bit and so on. And the camera quality of what we were using was just not good enough and so on. So, and it was quite an expensive software package that we were using, and we gave it like some period of time, and then we just canned it basically. We're like, okay, this concept is dead. Until years later, customers, it became a bit more, and people were more comfortable kind of being on a shared video call and so on. I think that's one of the reasons where we've seen a lot of our, some of our competitors fail and then fall away, and disappeared over a period of time. Like I remember our fiercest competitor was called Cool Diamonds, and they're not around anymore. It's like, way back so when we started.
Now. No, shouldn't have. Yeah.
So sorry, no, don't, and a few others. There was a spectacular crash, and accusations of fraud and so on with a large jeweler as well, a huge store in Covent Garden. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. You probably don't. Okay, so yeah, I don't want to mention the name. And I think if you believe in what you're doing, you do things right, you listen to the customer, and you kind of persevere, you build a good business with a really fundamental good core that can withstand, kind of the odd cataclysmic event.
As a leader, how do you, acknowledge when something hasn't gone right, and kind of pull the plug? Like, how do you kind of, yeah.
So that's a little bit hard. It depends how vested you are in it.
I bet if it was your baby, it's
exactly. So we've experimented. Like in the beginning of the business, we thought we could sell on like eBay, and which was obviously like a counter to luxury and so on. And we were like, no, feels just wrong on so many levels. And so we pulled the plug on. We spent like a couple of months developing some stuff, and then we're like, we got in some. It was like diffusion line, like Armani Exchange. But not.
7 diamonds.
Exactly.
Diamonds-ish.
But we realized that for many reasons that was kind of a mistake. But it's you gotta try different things, and sometimes you try some technology, sometimes you try some. We actually did some male cufflinks. We were trying to figure out we need some male jewelry, and we did some cufflinks, and it was just we went straight for solid gold, and it was way too expensive. That's not what there's so many gold plated offerings out there that actually this is not, so you create a small design, you launch a little campaign, and it works, it doesn't work. But now actually with men engagement rings, where you see a lot more men wanting some diamonds in a more masculine kind of styled ring, and with some larger diamonds in, so we've launched that. It's been quite successful. So, it's kind of, you do figure it out, but you got to just, you got to experiment a little bit and allow for things to go wrong. But, what was it? I think Warren Buffett said, never dip both feet in the water.
Right.
So it's kind of, you got to do, small incremental steps, basically. Where we really held our breath also was opening up showrooms in other countries, and then you got Brexit. But, operating in Europe was obviously a lot more complicated, and we had to open up, but opening up was definitely the right thing to do. And I think for the brand to transcend outside of the UK, we wanted to be more international. We've opened now in Dubai as well. So we're in the Middle East, which is really great as well. We've got good coverage in Scandinavia. And we've opened our first ever boutique. So we have a real store in my home country of Copenhagen. Wow. I just came back from the launch party about 10 days ago. So I'm really obviously very excited by that.
Thank God it wasn't yesterday.
Yeah, I'll be a little bit worse for now. It was great, but it's just amazing to have people, with the footfall, with something we hadn't experienced. Like, we still get people coming to our showrooms thinking it's a store, and then they end up coming up to the showroom basically. Well, I didn't realize I needed to book an appointment and so on, but it's the kind of which is nice, and it means that the brand is has got momentum. But it's really cool with the store and kind of people. We're still not letting people. There's a lot of security, so people knocking on because the buzzer hasn't even been built yet, basically. But
oh wow,
yeah, but it's great, and I think I'm proud that the brand has been able to expand in that kind of way as well, because we were traditionally very anti-retail in a way. The concept was anti-retail, and the reason for that. Actually, there's real financial and economic reasons for that as well, is because once you have a store, you need to fill the store with lots of items. And then if, we like to be, almost like a live data exchange in terms of pricing and so on.
And light with, kind of.
So if you're stuck with lots of stock, diamond prices go down 10, 15, 20%, you're, either having to take a huge hit or charging your customers too much. And actually, so we're very much live prices with our offering, and kind of inventory light, and it has some handicaps in terms of speed and turnaround time and so on. But we've taken some steps to kind of compensate for that.
Do you believe that's in the best interest of the customer, that kind of approach?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes it goes against the customer, but being stuck with inventory is bad for any kind of retail business. And so, being able to be flexible on that level, I think has really allowed us to fight through a whole bunch of different periods like COVID and so on as well. And it allows us to roll out concepts quicker as well. But, you don't get the convenience of what you get in a traditional store, but that's not what we're about. We're not about the traditional model. I think we've come up with something which is much more flexible and dynamic, and allows the consumer to really partake in the process as well. But it doesn't suit everybody. And I think, again, if you try to service everybody, you end up failing. You got to know who you are, and you got to know your customer and the people that you're trying to serve, basically. So, and I think that's definitely a principle that we live by.
How do you build in feedback and learning from customers, and kind of, is that something that you do as a business, and what kind of format and shape does that look like?
Yeah, so feedback from customers is we do a bit of customer survey, which is good. Reviews are incredibly important. Sometimes negative reviews really help shape and form how we move going forward. And I think we've had periods of time where the feedback from customers through things like reviews were not very good. And we were like, okay, is there an issue with our communication? It's allowed us to address lots of things. And that's, I think in the modern age of e-commerce, the power has shifted to the consumer. And so you either fight that and that's a losing battle, or you embrace that and it makes you a better company. And so, this is kind of where I think we're very much in that. So number one, people tell us loudly, online, if we're not doing a good job, and we listen to it, and we've made lots of corrections based on that. And then getting really strong people in that are much more customer minded, that have maybe experience from other brands, that help us form better structures to anticipate and catch those things earlier, and then correct them and engage with the customer and communicate with the customer at an earlier stage than we were doing. So I think, and then that feeds back through, okay, then we need to change our processes because this keeps happening or that keeps happening. And I think that's about having a flat structure, not having people afraid of being able to speak up and making our team feel listened to, because then you get that feedback and encouragement, and rather than being upset that they're suggesting something and then in the end they give up, they're encouraged to come with good ideas and to tell us what they're seeing, what's causing them problems. And it's like the thing I ask when I walk into any of my team. I'm always like, how's it going? What's going on? Have you had any issues? It's those kind of questions. And then they open up and they, if they trust you and they don't think it's going to be used against them, but actually it's part of, they need to feel that it's their business, that they have a chance to shape the business. And then you create an environment where people are encouraged to kind of speak up and make things better, basically. So, but it's not so easy, because at times we're moving fast. And we don't always have time. You need to kind of pause and consolidate sometimes as well. In phases, you sprint and then you consolidate and so on. And those are very important moments where you need to listen to what's going on as you're trying to make sure that your structures are solid.
If you could change one thing about your industry, and perhaps it's something that you've been leading on already, but what would you change about the industry that you're in?
No, I think it's a fabulous industry. I think that it's really tough for young emerging designers to kind of get traction, because it's dominated by some larger players. But having said that, it's not nearly dominated by larger players as many other industries, because it is an incredibly fragmented industry. That's the kind of question, like, what I'm really stuck, because I'm trying to think about is that, what is it I don't like about the industry? I mean, which I think, it used to be a very closed industry. It's a bit more transparent and open. I think that, we've been part of this intermediating a lot of people in the industry. So there's more transparency that's come through. I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of hidden talent. I wish that there was more a lot more of the younger generation coming through into the industry. I think it's, the craftsmanship shifted overseas, and the majority of jewelry is made overseas. And I think that is just tragedy. That's probably one of the things that is real shame, that the knowledge and the skill has been lost. And there's very few craftsmen left in the UK. And actually, I would wish that there was better promotion and education and salaries and so on for, more people coming into the industry with the kind of craft and skill. So it's hard to recruit people, and, we have to train people up from scratch to some extent. So, I think it's a real shame that the manufacturing is gone to a greater extent. That's what Hatton Garden was built up. It wasn't originally retail; it was manufacturing. That was all around that area, and that's gone, to the Far East. It's gone to India, and it's been lost. And so I hope that There's, the government's done, not this government, but government in general, with the apprenticeships schemes, have encouraged more people to come kind of into industry. But it's not enough. There needs to be kind of more support, more focus on the training. And I love kind of the philosophy in Germany, where there's great training and seen as a really credible alternative to university. I think a lot of people go to university and waste their time. And actually in Germany, you've got a lot of people that go into these like training apprenticeships. It's really encouraged in industry. And as a result, Germany's still kind of leading manufacturing in a lot of areas that has otherwise, shifted to lower cost territories. So, and I wish there was a bit more of that here in the UK, encouragement, for industry to train and to generate people with really highly skilled people in craftsmanship and industry. So I think that's one of the very sad aspects of it. Besides that, I think the industry is fabulous. It's fabulous. It's got great characters, all that, handcraftedness of it, that nature, and, things are done on a handshake, which is just beautiful. There's a lot of trust between players and in the industry. There isn't, big, thick legal contracts. Everything's done on a handshake. It still is. So those are the really beautiful aspects of the tradition of the industry. Look, the mining has cleaned itself up to a greater extent as well. Obviously, I mean, the industry has a bit of a dirty reputation if you talk about blood diamonds and so on. But it's funny that kind of diamonds was hung out to dry, but actually, when you walk around with your iPhone,
the cobalt mining,
the rare earth elements that are in the phone have, at least, if not way more problems than diamonds ever really had. And to be honest with you, I mean, today diamonds is a pretty clean industry. All the big players have gone, super responsible sourcing. And, we need to work on the supply chain a bit more to make sure there's more transparency. We're very much at the forefront of that. So I think the industry can do a bit more, but people want it to be a bit opaque on purpose as well, because they don't really want to know like the origins and the supply agreements that they have and so on. But the large players, I think, are have really conformed well to responsible sourcing. And good industry practice and treating their employees well and so on. And there's very little smuggling kind of, left in the industry. The industry's done really well to clean itself up, which I think is really good. And then you got poster childs like Botswana, which was one of the poorest countries in Africa. And the government was really, was really good at anticipating how to change things, made a really good kind of decisions in the financial arena. And as a result, because of diamonds, has been able to invest back into its infrastructure, hospitals, schools, roads, jobs, and companies like De Beers moved a huge portion of their office of back staff and so on, to Botswana to create more things, not just bring things out of the ground, but actually, finish goods in those areas. Yeah. So I think where something like diamonds has been used, for fantastic change. And as a result, I think Botswana has one of the highest GDPs in Africa. And that's, not only because of, but, down a large part down to diamonds. So you can see the kind of the power of positive change that it can have when you think about it in the right way, as opposed to corrupt governments, siphoning it off to their friends, and kind of putting it in their pockets and so on, which I think is, one of the reasons why it's got, bad reputation. Look, in the end, diamonds are the most portable form of wealth that there is. So, people can take their entire fortune and put it into one stone, put it in their pocket, and then, leave country, which is one of the reasons why it's the fascination and appeal, right?
I guess it's up there with crypto or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. But, crypto is much more traceable than a diamond actually is. So, indeed.